Okay, I think we're going to get started. Oh, this is great sound. I'm sure you can all hear me. Okay, so I'm just going to give a little preface that I did land this morning and have walked now 6 miles, most of which was in pouring rain. I'm dry, so I think I'm presentable, but I did luckily prepare ahead, and just in case I may need to look at notes here and there if I forget where I am. But I'm really happy that you're all here for our session today. We're going to talk about LEED for cities and how it's a catalyst for change in this decade of action. So I'm Hilari Varnadore. I'm the Vice President for Cities at the U.S. Green Building Council. I'm really honored to be here. This is my first COP, and I live in the DC area, so I'm just really excited to be in the UK for the first time as well. So USGBC's vision is that buildings and communities will regenerate and sustain the health and vitality of all life within a generation. And through our work with LEED for Cities, we're actually able to provide the ultimate vertical evolution from LEED for buildings and interiors and spaces all the way to the community and city scale. So if you think about really scaling the standards and strategies from interiors and buildings all the way up to the cities, that's what our program is really all about. So I don't think there's any doubt in the room here that cities are the epicenter of our movement, right? We've talked a lot about cities over the past week. And we look to mayors as well as their chief sustainability, resilience, equity, and now heat officers for leadership. So what's working, what's not working? Once it's tested, what can we do to advance and share with other places to accelerate progress? And that's really at the core of what we do at USGBC and the LEED for Cities program. But we all know that city and county leaders can't do it on their own. This is just a handful of the partners that I work with and am coordinating with to really take the work to the next level. Expand the tent and get the support that local governments need to be successful. But clearly we need private sector, utilities, academia, regional governments, local governments, and federal governments, philanthropic institutions, just to help us get where we need to be. So our goal today is we're going to share how LEED for Cities is a sustainability accelerator. Like I said, you probably have heard of LEED for buildings, but maybe not LEED for cities. So we're going to give you a little bit of the inside scoop there. And I'm really excited to be joined by mayors that have committed not only to LEED certification, but also leading our movement and providing inspiration to others, not only in the US, but around the world. So this is just our brief agenda, so you'll see. We'll kind of get some mayoral feedback right up front. You'll hear from me, and then we're actually going to have a nice intimate dialogue. Mayor Suarez and I are going to talk about what's going on in Miami and his leadership at the global stage. So you'll get to hear a lot of really interesting responses, I think, from him. And then at the end, we're going to do a bit of a call to action, talk about, we've been so focused in the U.S. We're in the U.S. Climate Action Center. How does this work really go global? And so we'll give you a couple of examples of how you can help us do that. So I'm going to introduce a mayor who's not physically present today. Mayor Lyles happens to be co-chair of America's All In, and the city of Charlotte, actually in North Carolina, just certified in LEED for Cities just a couple of weeks ago, September 24th. So she's in her second term of mayor in Charlotte. She's got a proud history of public service. Not only has she been she has been an elected official, but she actually goes way back to being staff, and I learned that she was part of the first ever city budget process years and years ago. So dedicated public servant. We're going to hear from her by video. She's going to share some remarks with us. But we have an actual mayor in the room, Mayor Suarez, and I'm joined with him. He's going to come up on stage with me in just a few minutes. But I did learn in his NPR, as I was going to Dulles the other day, he was on NPR and learned that he was elected for his second term as well, just this past Tuesday. So congratulations on that. But I think it's also really important to note that he's here, and I thank the U.S. Conference of Mayors for making his participation, happen today. So thank you to USCM. But he not only takes a leadership role at the U.S. level, also within the state of Florida with the League of Cities. And then I thought it was really interesting. I learned that he is the only American mayor that's part of the Global Commission on Adaptation. So I'm sure we'll hear a little bit about that today. And you're a C40 city. So lots going on that we're going to hear about from you. So let's start with the opening remarks from Mayor Lyles. Like I mentioned, they certified LEED Gold back in September 24th. And since she couldn't be here, she thought she would just share a few minutes so you could hear a little bit more about Charlotte.
Hi, I'm Vi Lyles, the mayor of Charlotte, North Carolina. I am proud to serve as co-chair of America is All In, which is one of the most expansive coalition of leaders ever assembled in support of climate action in the United States. We are mobilizing thousands of United States cities, states, tribal nations, businesses, schools, health, faith, and cultural institutions. Charlotte has been my home for most of my life, and I can't imagine a better place to live. I chose to settle in Charlotte because of the energy and opportunity that a big city environment provides. Fast forwarding to today, Charlotte's population has more than doubled to almost 900,000 residents, and is now the 15th largest city in the United States. Every day, we welcome more than 120 new residents, and our city is expected to add 400,000 people over the next 20 years. Our region is home to more than 2.5 million people and is one of the top 5 fastest growing large cities in the United States. As you all know, as a fast-growing region, we have no choice but to take action. Our increasing population density will further strain infrastructure that is already threatened by higher temperatures and increased precipitation intensity. This growth will also lead to increases in respiratory and heat-related illnesses associated with emissions and increasing temperatures. And the people who are most affected are already our most vulnerable residents. As a city, we are committed to combating climate change by not only reducing our municipal greenhouse gas emissions, but also supporting our community to become a low-carbon city, keeping in line with the Paris Climate Agreement. We have been working hard to strive toward these ambitious goals, and we are excited that our work has been recognized by the USGBC community. Charlotte was recently named a LEED Cities Gold Certified City. Charlotte joins a group of 120 cities and more globally to be certified, is one of the 24 cities with a top certification in the world, and has the highest certification in our state of North Carolina. We are working diligently to reduce our carbon emissions and improve our environment and quality of life. Some examples include investing in solar energy and energy efficiency, accelerating the transition of our fleet, including our buses, to electric, creating workforce development opportunities where they're most needed, focused on careers in clean energy. This includes paid training and jobs that pay a livable wage and support our residents with barriers to employment. And by building a walkable, bikeable city with accessible public transit. We are excited that the LEED for Cities and Communities platform and framework allows us to go even further with our goals by connecting with like-minded communities and using data to drive decision-making for a low-carbon, equitable, and livable future for Charlotte.
Can we go back to slides? So I think we're going to jump right into the LEED for Cities overview. and bring the mayor up on stage in a few minutes so that you can continue relaxing. I know you've had a busy schedule. So is that okay with you? Okay. That way you don't have to sit here and watch me give, you know. Okay. So here we are. So as we just heard from Charlotte, North Carolina, it's imperative that buildings, communities, and cities accelerate ambition toward the UN Sustainable Development Goals and global climate targets. And what I'm going to do now is give you all this kind of update on LEED for Cities to catch you up to speed. So LEED for Cities is catalyzing a new generation of inclusive, healthy, high-performance, sustainable cities, towns, and counties around the country and the world. And LEED for Cities is globally applicable, yet locally relevant. And in fact, we put out an SDG alignment report recently that really looks at if you're a local government interested in working toward the SDGs, since they're at the nation state level, you know, you can use standards and strategies in LEED for Cities so that you can really take them to your local community and make a difference at the global scale. We have a global network of stakeholders, so we're very invested in stakeholder engagement and really bringing in thought leadership to evolve the program over time. And so there is a 25-member cities and communities working group. It's a volunteer group made up of people all around the world, and we also have subcommittees that engage people to really help to make sure that we're moving ahead. Sustainability, the field of practice, is ever changing, and it's very important to have these leaders with us along the way. So Mayor Lyles actually referenced the local governments that are certified. There are about 120 local governments that are certified in the rating system. But more broadly, we do actually have rating system for cities and communities. And when we say communities, we actually mean it could be a district, a neighborhood, it could be a campus, a downtown, like a business improvement district, even an airport or a theme park can utilize LEED for communities. So globally, cities and communities together, we have more than 130 certified and 250 registered projects. You'll see there's been a lot of work in the US, and in fact, prior to LEED for Cities, the US had the STAR Community Rating System, which was a US-based local government rating system for sustainability. And for the last 10, 15 years, we've been really building momentum there, but that's kind of my point that we'll get to at the end about how to go global with this program. So very diverse local governments are using LEED for Cities, from very large places like the city of Suarez in India to a very small place in Florida called Jupiter Inlet Colony, which is a village of under 500. So everyone in between. Probably our sweet spot, it was right in like 300 to 400,000 population is about our kind of average size of the local governments that are using the program. So here are the program goals. They, you know, probably don't shock you. They're very consistent with many of the goals that we've been talking about over the last week. Very much about inspiring leadership and transformation in local governments. And I'm very much aware and connected to the last goal, which is about raising the standard of living and quality of life of all humans around the globe. And as you'll see, maybe you can see, that's actually a pretty big size. Our scorecard is really taking a holistic approach to sustainability. So we're looking at the social, economic, and environmental dimensions. The quality of life category was actually created for LEED for Cities. It's not in the other LEED rating systems. Really gets at social equity, prosperity, inclusion, things like civil and human rights. So this is not just a green rating system. It really is holistic and looking at you know, a comprehensive framework for sustainability in government. So what local governments do is they evaluate local conditions. We have them do a nature assessment and also an equity assessment as part of prerequisites, as well as looking at things like do our residents have 100% access to power, water, solid waste management, things like that. Then they benchmark performance with peers, and probably of interest to people at the COP are tied to, they have to report GHG emissions per capita as well as VMT per capita. Those are required indicators that have to be both reported and tracked as part of certification. And then we have credits that are optional that local governments work through, from green building policy to location efficiency, renewable energy, green spaces, looking at not just whether you have green spaces, but whether there's equitable access, if people have a half-mile walk distance to green spaces. And then credits on topics like environmental justice. So we're really covering the bases here. What's really interesting too is there is an innovation category. That's where local governments tell us what they're doing that are gaps in the rating system, the things that they're doing that are above and beyond. Holistic Human Health is a really cool innovation credit that the city of Louisville, Kentucky put forth. They have the first NIH study where they're using trees as medicine in a public health study, which is really looking to see if planting trees is going to improve the health of residents in neighborhoods that have had disinvestment over the years. And so when they're done all of that, they obviously get a report and they get their certification level. This just gives you a glimpse at some of the scoring that local governments get through the process. But I think it's important that local governments take action every day, right? You adopt policy, you adopt a budget, you put programs into place, but are those actions moving the needle on outcomes at the community scale? And really this process helps you to see whether the actions that you're taking are really making a difference. So as I mentioned, LEED for Cities accelerates sustainability and climate action. Local government chief sustainability officers, chief resilience officers are able to really use it as a comprehensive management framework for sustainability. And I invite you to check out this Forbes article if you haven't seen it. It's about the rise of the sustainability officer, and it has it's a really good approach with the sustainable innovation flywheel that talks about the core competencies of the CSO that are going to be really important, not just in local government, but all sectors over the next 10 years. I use the flywheel, though, to kind of lay out how we're addressing it through our program. And so I talked a little bit about the benchmarking, but so obviously projects have to benchmark performance. They do get peer-to-peer benchmarking, so it's like how are they doing relative to others, not just how are they doing on their own. This is Mayor Akimoto from the city of Sapporo, Japan, who's very much committed to our ARC platform, which is where a lot of that data work happens. But local governments are committing to continuous improvement. It's not just a one-off. It's not a LEED plaque on the wall and they're done. This is where we are today. It's a baseline assessment, and they're coming back, year after year to make improvements based on results. City of Las Vegas adopted a 2050 master plan this summer that was completely aligned with LEED for Cities and identifies gaps that they found through certification. They've weaved them into their long-range plan so that they can be working on those things that were identified as weaker areas through our process. So in addition to planning, obviously policy, the budget, codes and ordinances, any of those gaps that are identified along the way turn straight into action. City of Greensboro, North Carolina, they weren't doing really anything quite yet on food waste or composting, and they were able to make some immediate adjustments to their sustainable action plan to move that into their 5-year plan. I think a big thing right now, people have been talking about how we just really need to institutionalize sustainability and really bring everyone in government to the table, and then obviously the partners that we were talking about earlier. I was a sustainability, I didn't tell you this, I was a sustainability director about 10, 12 years ago. And at that time, it was kind of like, that's Hilari's job. She's the sustainability director. But I think we've come a long way, and local governments are realizing that sustainability and climate it's everyone's job. And so really making more employees aware and really educated about it, and then involving them in the process, and kind of going through the results and talking about what are we going to prioritize, what do we want to take next. We have this really great program in the U.S. that we would love to scale, love to take to other places. It's the Local Government Leadership Program. It's funded and supported by Bank of America. They help us to bring cohorts of local governments through the process together every year. And actually, City of Miami and City of Charlotte were both one of those cities. But through that, not only are we getting that cross-departmental coordination and institutionalizing sustainability at home, but we're learning from peer cities right all around the country. And we see that in a lot of the other networks and partnerships for cities that have been very present at the COP this week. But for just making sure that those lessons from cities at the top, making the biggest progress, that they're shared with all of the other places so that they can move forward faster. And then I guess the other big piece, and particularly now with the budget reconciliation plan moving forward and the infrastructure bill coming along in the U.S., There will be federal dollars that are going to be availed to sustainability and climate work shortly. And so not only for that type of funding, but also investors and other funders, maybe from philanthropy, having results and having this process, it really kind of strategically prioritizes where we need to go next and identifies these are the things we need to do so that it's completely lined up for those funding opportunities. Okay, so drum roll. I have talked enough, and I'm telling you, you guys are probably bored. I'm sorry. I told you you're going to be bored. But now it's time to bring up Mayor Suarez. I have some great questions for him. So please come up. I'd love you to just tell us what's going on. You've been here for, I don't know how many days, but maybe, come on.
I love the audio system. It's good audio. That's halfway to the battle right there.
I know.
Yeah, so we've been here since Thursday, and it's been action-packed. Judy and the entire U.S. Conference of Mayors team, of which I am the vice president, here on behalf of the president who couldn't make it, on behalf of a delegation of mayors from C40 to mayors in Mississippi that are very, very concerned about how climate is impacting their cities. And we all have different challenges throughout the United States, but we are unified in the desire to want to make whatever transformational changes and whatever investments need to be made to provide not only for our generation, but for my children and my unborn grandchildren, a legacy of enjoyment of this planet that we've had. And frankly, obviously, the biodiversity that we've experienced in our generation, much of which we seem to be losing. And I think it's our executive director often reminds me that 85% of the population of the United States is in cities, 91% of the GDP. So when the prior administration got out of the Paris Climate Accord, I think it was very comforting that cities didn't follow, right? That cities stayed in, and that there were many leaders, many mayors that said, right, that we're not going to back out. And I think when you put those numbers in perspective, when you think about the population, when you think about the GDP that's produced by cities, you realize that cities really can't be the driving force, the catalyst for change. Having said that, obviously, our superior governments, right, our states and our federal governments have significantly more resources. And so cities alone can't do it. They can do the best that they can, and we are going to do everything that we can without any expectation of help. But it would be wonderful, and I know the Conference of Mayors, who has done a magnificent job this year in particular, and our president has done a magnificent job advocating for federal funding on a variety of fronts, the American Rescue Plan, which was passed, and now you see it was, that's right, yeah, you can woo that. We got $140 million, that's a lot of woo for our city. That was a bipartisan effort of mayors that really pushed for the kinds of investments that we needed to sustain ourselves into the future.
So to jump around, since you're talking about the Biden, all the work at the federal level, I know you have a green recovery plan as part of your carbon neutral plan that's coming out soon. And I'm just curious, how, with COVID and tell us a little bit about the impact of COVID, just to be real. How's Miami doing? How are your residents? How are your businesses? We're here, we all traveled, right?
Sure.
But what's really going on the ground?
Well, we're actually doing very well. We came out of the pandemic extremely strong. We just got a job report that our unemployment is under 5%, a high of 12% during the pandemic. So we have recovered very well. We are also, getting a lot of migration from up north and from out west for people who want to come and try Miami, and we're developing a technological and finance ecosystem that is helping create high-paying jobs to diversify our economy. That has been largely a hospitality and construction-based economy. So we're doing well, but we're still concerned about a lot of the same issues that we dealt with pre-COVID. that in many ways have been exacerbated by COVID, particularly issues of inequality.
Right, and so that's what I was, when I was going onto the green economy piece, I was just curious with the green economy plan, like what are you doing to ensure local low-income residents are benefiting in Miami?
Well, the green economy plan first sets forth the proposition that it is not the environment or the economy, right? There's this false narrative or false dichotomy that you have to choose. Either you are pro-environment and you are anti-economy, or you are pro-economy and you are anti-environment. And I think in Miami, we want to sort of redefine how the economy and our economics are looked at. For us, we say that the economy is the environment is the economy. And that starts with the recognition that our bay is an enormous economic engine for us. Like I said, it creates a significant amount of biodiversity so that people can enjoy nature. We also have almost like a wonder of the world in the Everglades right next door. And then, of course, we have to protect our aquifer and make sure that we have sustainable drinking water for the present and future needs of the city and the county. So that is all economic in nature.
Yeah.
And when you look at some of the things that are happening on the sustainability front, whether it's rooftop solar, whether it's electric vehicles, they're getting to a point where they're good economics. They're not just good for the environment, they're good for your pocketbook. And I think the more we invest in those kinds of technologies so that they can continue to scale and create economies of scale and lower cost, the better off we're going to be. I mean, I do see a future where, rooftop solar is as inexpensive as having a refrigerator or having any appliance, and we're not quite there yet. But I do see us getting there, and I also see a future where everyone is going to be driving essentially an electric vehicle, and I think that's coming in the near future.
I live in the DC area and I drive just a Prius, and I still get people kind of looking at me like, but that's how
I ordered my Tesla and it hasn't come in yet, so I don't know what's going on. I heard something about some deal they made with Hertz. I hope they didn't skip me. No, I'm just kidding. Elon, I know you're out there, probably watching this.
Well, if my husband's watching or sees the live stream, now he's going to tell me, you need a Tesla.
Yes, exactly.
Because that's what I think the kids really want.
That's what my son was a huge advocate for, and it was a lot of fun to see my wife resist. And my son just sort of, I said, honey, we got to do what the kids want. What do you want me to tell you? And so we had the stormwater master plan, and then on Earth Day of this year, we unveiled, at least skeletally, the carbon neutrality plan, the carbon neutral plan. And so we are now shredding it in the city, getting input from the public before we finalize it. And it's just an exciting collaborative process where we have gotten the city involved and really challenged ourselves to think about what the next 15 to 30 years are going to look like. And I'm very, very satisfied with the way that the city has really embraced this plan.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about like constituents, your constituents, and just where I live even. The fact that we're putting out carbon neutral plans now, I mean, wasn't it 5-10 years ago, we maybe said climate action plan, but
Yeah.
it's a sea change, right? Do you think that your constituents are just like starting, first of all, to understand what carbon means? 'Cause
Yeah,
it's
I think
difference, right?
I think they've, I think talked about this a little bit offline. For us, climate effects are not abstract; they're very real. We deal with them. In fact, on the way over here, I was getting messages on my Instagram because we had what we call a rain bomb, where we have a more intense than usual rain event, and we had flooding sporadically throughout the city, and it's frustrating for me. I mean, this is we're an industrialized city, a big city, and an industrialized country, and to have to see cars, almost underwater, it's very frustrating, and it's humbling. Mother Nature has a way to humble you. But the good news is that it's made it very clear to our residents that we have to act. I mean, we cannot afford to put our head in the sand. And it's I don't think it's an accident that the resiliency bond passed the year that we got hit by Hurricane Irma. So we were hit by Hurricane Irma in September of the year that the resiliency bond passed. And I think it's fair to say, had we not been hit with Irma, I'm not sure that the bond would have passed. I mean, it was that could have made the difference. And we were there for month and a half, cleaning up the city and making sure that our energy infrastructure was resilient enough, and our communications infrastructure. And we take a lot of things for granted. People who are beset by climatic trauma, right, realize how apocalyptic it can get very quickly. I mean, we really, we flip the switch and the light comes on. We touch the button and the toilet flushes. We turn the spigot and clean water comes out most of the time. And we just take those things for granted. And when your electricity is not working, and you can't refrigerate food, and you can't cook, and you can't, it gets very, very, very apocalyptic. And I had people screaming at me 9 days after our power was out, after Hurricane Irma, and then 30 minutes would go by if I don't have any control over the electricity because it's a semi-autonomous agency of the state, and then the electricity would go back on, and I get the same phone call from the same person. You're God. I don't know what you did. I said, I wish I did something, but thank you for calling me God. I appreciate that. You were calling me the devil about 30 minutes ago. So I'll take that, but it is in Miami, and I think in other parts of the country as well. It's no longer an abstract exercise. This is very real for us. The effects of climate change are very real, and if we did nothing about it, we would be risking a tremendous amount.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is probably a wonky question that maybe I'm the only one that really is interested, but I really want to know not just about the stakeholders, the constituents, the residents, but what about internal to government? Like, is there a sea change happening there too? Like, are your department directors and your agencies coming together on all of this? Yeah,
and there's been debate on it too. I'll give you an example. Last year, for a year, we tried to change our resiliency director and put them over public works. And it was a little bit controversial because there were some in the community that thought that we were actually reducing the importance of resiliency in our organization. And we felt that we were doing the opposite. We felt like we were operationalizing our resiliency department, because resiliency departments have a tendency to be planning departments, right? They have 2 to 3 or 4 employees. We were making the resiliency director the head of our public works department. So they had a 100+ person department to operationalize what they were doing. So we probably didn't do a good job explaining it. And so we got some, pushback. And then we said, okay, fine, let's do this a little different. Let's do it. Let's listen, because you always want to be listening to your residents. And by the way, and the activists in the community, which are all acting pretty much in good faith and want to see us accelerate the positive change as much as possible. And so we kind of went to a hybrid. We reshifted the resiliency director in the org chart. We buffered it, and we actually increased the funding of the department, so we added some personnel. But then we increased it on the org chart so that it also had some operational effect, because we want that person to be able to tell somebody, hey, you need to do X, as opposed to producing a document that someone else has to look at and say, hey, we need you to do X, right? So kind of skip a step and give that person more authority. So that was what we were trying to do. We did it sort of clumsily. But I do think that I think there's two things right now in our organization that are core values. I think one of them is the concept that resiliency has to weave everything that we do. The other core value is that technology has to sort of be integrated in everything that we do.
Well, on tech, we talked to Google about being here with us today, and we weren't really able to figure out how to get them live maybe with us. But you've been a part of a couple of Google announcements this week with C40s, right? And C40 City, excuse me. And it's pretty exciting, I think, that they're taking their Environmental Insight Explorer tool to 20,000 global cities. Do you know if Miami has been the recipient of any of that data so far?
We are, and we're actually working with a company called AECOM that has been helping us put together our carbon neutrality plan using some of the AIE data. And, EIE data, sorry. Those acronyms. EIE data. And I think it's fascinating that they've cross-checked the data with other data sets, and they're very similar, which means that the data that they are producing is accurate. I think for us to be serious about what we're doing, we have to have measurable data that we can scrutinize and that we can compare, and frankly to keep some of the actors honest, because a lot of the information that we get in our carbon neutrality plan is based on other agencies telling us the truth, right? And so we want to make sure that, and we're going to a world, I think, of greater environmental accountability. That's just my perspective, with ESG being a greater component of corporate good governance. But I think that there's a second piece to it, which is, and we talked a little bit about this off the air too, when we talk about companies that are carbon neutral or claim to be carbon neutral, right? I think a big part of that claim is going to be carbon offsets, and some of that will be tokenized carbon offsets. So you're going to have a financial model that will hopefully be a regulated financial model, which will hopefully keep some of the actors in that space accountable and honest about what they're doing.
Yeah. Well, so in addition to AECOM and Google, I'm curious about other partnerships that are going on in your region even. And my experience, as you know, has mostly been with staff. I've worked with your staff on the LEED for City certification.
It's a good one.
And
we're almost there.
Yeah, you're so close. Well, maybe I'll ask you a question
Sure.
about that in a minute. But one thing that I'm seeing, first off, Florida, there's more cities and counties registered and certified in our program in Florida than any other state in the country.
Woo!
You all, there's, I think,
that's worth a clap.
30,
For sure.
And we won't steal your thunder, but Miami-Dade County and Miami Beach just certified. So you're next,
Yeah.
and it's going to be a big party in your
It
area. We'll get all three of you together, and I think now Coral Gables is
that's
also
my
working
friend,
on
yeah.
it. So everybody's really pumped up. But what I'm seeing with staff is that they're just collaborative. There's a culture of collaboration. There's competition, but it's friendly.
Sure.
It's like we want to push each other forward and really make a difference. And so I'm curious, are you seeing the same thing at the elected official level? How are the mayors working together? And
we get along, and I think that's important. I get along with my county mayor. I get along with my sister and sister mayors around the county. I was the president of the Miami-Dade League of Cities for a time, so I was the president of all the 34 cities in Miami-Dade County. And we have a good group right now. We have a group of people that are not, it's not about them, right? It's really about collaborating, and that sort of seeps into the staff. Yeah. And we have absolutely no problem sharing the limelight, going to press conferences together, not trying to get ahead of each other. We're not trying to steal anybody's thunder. Frankly, this problem is beyond sort of the capabilities of any one city. So right. Collaboration is the key on solving some of these issues, because from a resource perspective, whether it's knowledge resource or financial resource, you need help. I mean, yeah. We need help. So.
Well, and you have really successful regional climate compacts in your region.
We do.
Would that be maybe one of the kickstarters of all of this, or
yeah,
does it go back further, I guess?
No, Resilient 305 strategy is one. Rockefeller, we're a Rockefeller city, but we're really a region, right? We're the only 100 Rockefeller cities that applied as a region, and I think that was done intentionally. We realized that it's not about any one particular entity sticking out. It's really more about how can we marshal resources as a community. We're a 2.8 million person MSA. So and if you consider South Florida, which is Palm Beach down, it's over 6 million MSA. So I mean, it's a huge population. And again, for us, having staff collaborate with each other just makes us more effective.
Absolutely. So let's go back to the LEED for Cities part.
Let's go.
Okay, so I'm just curious. So when you do certify and you have results, you've been involved in so many big initiatives. So how does this one fit in? Like, how do you think the results from, it's a comprehensive management framework for sustainability. So not just focused on climate, it's covering a lot of things. I'm just wondering, does it tie into maybe strategic planning or like any other kind of big picture items at the city?
Yeah, I think, and it's pretty evident in your presentation earlier that, you have planning documents like the Resiliency 305 strategy, but you have, with a LEED certification, I think you have a measuring document, right, where you can see what are the gaps and you can maybe prioritize what you want to do, see what you can get in terms of bang for your buck, and also think about what are the most important vulnerabilities. I think that's, to me, sort of the biggest, I think the biggest benefit that you can get, because it's numerical, it's objective, and it's measured in a way that it makes it easy also to go back. Because remember, you have to invest money, you have to, it's not just a mayoral fiat. I don't just say, okay, we're going to do this, and then it happens. No, I have to go to my council, and I have to make an argument, and I have to make a compelling argument, and having the data, to demonstrate, hey, look, this is why we're going to go here. We're going to go invest in this particular category because this is a deficiency for us.
Right, using evidence.
As opposed to, look, this is our overall strategy, and we're just going to do everything equally or whatever.
Well, hopefully with the other local governments in your region all really coming together with the same shared goals, working together towards certification, really collaboratively, maybe it'll also bring, a lot of investment to the region, especially if you come to similar conclusions, which I assume you will.
Yeah, and one of the things that we're really focused on, and we haven't figured out exactly how to do it because I'm not sure anybody has, is we want to create a climate tech ecosystem in terms of employment. And there really isn't, I don't think you can say, hey, this is sort of the city right now for climate tech. And I think that's another reason why it's available. And us being a leader in climate nationally and internationally, I think it really behooves us to jump into that sphere and find out how to become a leader in that. So that goes to your point.
That sounds awesome, and we will be there to support you in that.
All right.
I think that's a great takeaway. So what barriers do you see as achieving your goals as mayor? You're just starting a new term soon here.
Sure.
You have a little while.
Yeah, I think there's two barriers, maybe three. One is, I'm always going to say resources. even though we have the $200 million, we would love to see, and in the infrastructure bill, this was certainly and we have to check to see if where it's at, but it's certainly a part of it was investment in resiliency. So to the extent that we can get federal matching funds, that would be extremely helpful. I think the other one is just the inertia of government. Government is just slow, by its nature, and I think it's hard. I was first elected to office when I was 32. I'm 44 now, and it's, I push and I push and I push, but I'm pushing a 4,500 person organization, and it's hard. It's hard to get everybody working at a particular speed. And then I think and I don't mean this in a bad way. I hope this doesn't come off wrong, but competency, in the sense that, governments weren't really built to deal with this problem. That wasn't the way a government is built from a competency perspective. And I think we're becoming more competent, right, as we hire people that are experts in this realm, but certainly going out and getting outside experts like AECOM and other, and relying on organizations like yours, that helps sort of layer on top of our organization a level of competency that gives us the ability to make decisions faster and make them more effective.
And probably help you take the work to scale.
100%.
So when you were just talking about your age and what you've been trying to get accomplished, it came to my mind as I was traveling here that when I was a senior in high school, which was in the 90s, I was voted most likely to save the earth. Wow. And I am close to your age, and I have not saved the earth yet, but I'm trying, and it's like an uphill battle, and we have days where we're feeling really good and days when we're feeling really low, sometimes apathetic, mostly when I was in college. But anyway, I really relate to your remarks about all the work that is ahead, but you got this. So I think we have one more question. Okay. So you've been focused on tech. You brought it up earlier, in crypto. And so I'm just curious how tech and innovation are going to tie into the climate adaptation and mitigation goals.
Well, I think on two fronts. One, I think, we talk a lot about mitigation. We talk a lot about adaptation, and I think there's a lot that we can do technologically in those two regards. I think one of the things we don't talk enough about is reversal, what I call reversal, which is how are we going to reverse some of the effects? If you look at the statistics on, if we get to only a degree and a half of warming in Celsius, we're not meeting our goals in terms of mitigation. We need to decarbonize the environment and get to a point where we're not just carbon neutral, but we are making sure that we can reverse. So I think at some point there will be I hope, an emphasis on reversing and spending a lot of energy and engineering on how do we reverse some of the things that have happened. I think the second thing is, we talked a little bit offline about Bitcoin and mining and energy consumption. And I think, it's right for the community to say, hey, if you're going to do this activity, we need to make sure that it's done in a responsible fashion. And I think what I'm seeing, at least in the U.S., is that Bitcoin miners are carbon neutral and want to be. By the way, not every company is. And so in many ways, they're better than what most companies are. And they are because of the criticism. In other words, the fact that, a lot of mining has been done in coal-producing countries like Russia and China. China just banned mining and banned Bitcoin is a good thing for the planet, and it's a good thing for Bitcoin, and it's a good thing for America. So I think we have to continue to push on companies that are in this space to pledge neutrality if they want to continue to be in this space.
Awesome. That's great. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'm going to give you another shout out when we get the slides back up. You've also committed to the Race to Zero campaign, the city has. And so I just want to do a little promo for anybody watching that that's also a very important initiative that has brought science-based targets and a real focus on equity and inclusion to the climate work, which again is something that I think it's really evolved over the last maybe 10 years or so. I wonder if they can get, oh, I can do it. Also, if anyone in the audience does have a question, you do have, wow, I've never seen a hand go up that
was
fast.
pretty fast.
Maybe in like
Too fast.
1983 and
These are my two Miami people, I think.
bring it on. All right, awesome. We have questions. Let's do it since we have time, right?
Thanks very much. I wondered if you could say anything specifically about the policies that you've brought in, or Miami in general has, to decarbonize buildings specifically.
Yeah, so we implemented an energy scoring system that now all buildings have to comply with to get a score as to what kind of, how they're contributing to either decarbonizing or not our environment. So now we're forcing large buildings to actually have to comply with a system that will give us the metrics for us to be able to. We've also, for buildings that are a certain size, we're requiring them to put electric vehicle chargers in the buildings as a standard feature of the building, so that the infrastructure starts getting built up when electric vehicles become the norm. We're not scrambling trying to figure out, well, how we're going to retrofit our garages to deal with all the electric vehicle supply that there is. So those are some of the concrete things that we've done, but more work to be done. And by the way, I'll just say this for all of you who are watching, or maybe who are watching: if you have any ideas on legislation or best practices, feel free. You know, we don't think we know it all, that's for sure. And we want to be cutting edge in terms of being, of legislation. And I think our development community is more receptive than people would think in terms of legislation that could, in theory, raise costs, but would be viewed long-term as good legislation.
Hey, Mayor. Quick question about the recertification program for buildings over 40 years old.
Yeah.
How are you looking at that, and what are you doing right now? Because that could be very, very costly for all these buildings, and the property values are super important for Miami to keep up to date with all that. So what are you doing for that?
Yeah, and I think you're referring to the fact that obviously a few months ago, one of our buildings collapsed. I'm sure many of you saw it. And it was a building that was on that cusp of the 40-year certification. And what was happening and what's been happening is there's a feeling that because a building is up, it's going to always be up. And so there was, homeowner associations, condo associations, which are like a mini government that govern how buildings are upkept, will often defer maintenance because it's expensive, like you said. In the case of the building that went down, I think it's fair to say that the special assessments would have been more than what many people paid for the apartment itself. So that's presents a very difficult issue. But because of the tragedy, and this is why, sort of like what happened to us in Hurricane Andrew in 1992, because of the tragedy, I think governments are much more sensitive. They're much less lenient they're not as lenient on letting a building breach the 40-year certification mark. And there's been a lot of talk about, bumping it up to 30 years, and maybe even earlier, just so we can start getting a view of what's going on with the building, and maybe create a longer horizon for people to have to repay some of those capital costs. And so it's not as big of a one-time shock to them when they have to do that.
So I organize the cultural sector for America is All In, and you've got 3 awesome museums, Perez Science Museum and Vizcaya, doing great work in Miami. And I want to make a pitch for don't forget, they can't usually access tax credits in order to do this work because they're nonprofits, right? And in order to make the tax credit work takes a lot of staff time and savviness. So keep them on your radar, keep supporting them because they make you look pretty good.
They
and
do.
they're awesome places.
They really are. We have 3 more cultural facilities that we're working on bringing online, which is the Gusman Theater, the Playhouse, which we need to renovate, and the Miami Marine Stadium. So we're working really hard to get those 3 online. Miami has experienced a tremendous cultural revolution I think it's one of the reasons why people are coming to Miami so much, because they feel that they can be stimulated when they're there. And, you know, we're going to start our Basel now in a few weeks. And you're going to see, I mean, I think it's one of the largest art shows in the world. And we also have a very robust private gallery, whether it's for exhibition or for sale in the country as well. I mean, we have an incredible in Wynwood and Alapata in the Design District. The Rubel Museum is incredible. Super Blue. I don't know if you've been to Super Blue or Rubel. You should see Rubel. Super Blue. You have the De La Cruz Gallery. You have the contemporary ICA Contemporary Arts Museum, which is incredible. I mean, we've really, that's one of the areas where we've exploded the most in the last 10 years.
Well, thanks everyone for the great questions. We're just going to wrap this up because I know you have somewhere to go, of course, but
CNN is waiting.
This has been really fun.
Actually, they are.
They really are waiting. So for everyone at the COP, please know there's a program called LEED Earth. It funds the certification of a city in a country that has not been a part of LEED for Cities yet, and there aren't a lot of them. There's only 8 global cities certified, so no one in the UK yet. So if you talk to anyone, they'll certify for free if they're the first to get signed up outside of the US. And then we talked about Race to Zero already, and then if you want to get a hold of me, that's the easiest way, cities@usgbc.org. This was really fun. It was so nice to meet you
so
in
much
person.
fun.
Really enjoyed it. Thanks for coming.
Thank you all.
Yeah.